So, good morning. What amazing stories we've heard this morning of people making their exodus here. When you came into the sanctuary this morning, you may have received a sign that says, "I am an immigrant." If you feel comfortable, if you feel safe, and you made your exodus to North America, I ask you to stand with or without your sign as you're able. For those of you on Zoom, if you emigrated, please raise your hands. If your parents or their parents left their country of origin for North America, stand now. And on Zoom, raise your hands. So let's look around. We've arrived from so many points to be here today, each our own thread woven into the tapestry of UUFBR. I'm a granddaughter of immigrants, Carpathian Jews. If people were to ask me, I'd say that I'm a social justice-minded, spiritually curious kind of Jew, and I'm a seven principles religious education kind of universalist. With these roots, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Passover, the original child-centered festival of freedom. Closer, more mic? Okay. I didn't get for many years any of Passover's contradictions, but I do now. And so I want to begin by saying that reflections on Passover like mine today might well need a trigger warning. Oppression is hard to talk about, hard to hear. In a time when illegal wars of aggression fill our screens, when civilians at home and abroad are senselessly killed, when U.S. residents are detained and deported, speaking about ancient struggles for freedom can feel almost cruelly ironic. Every single day, the world breaks my heart, and I think yours. To speak of deliverance in days of old while people suffer now can feel hollow. But perhaps now is exactly when sacred stories of liberation matter the most. So we gather as a beloved community to tell the story truthfully because telling the truth is a spiritual act. The Passover ceremonial meal, the Seder, makes the Exodus story feel real, and children have a starring role. The youngest child begins the Seder with 4 ritual questions. Why is this night different from all others? To be answered, because we were slaves in Egypt, as if it were yesterday that we, not our forebears, were in bondage, and today we're now free, and we can recline at our own Seder table. For more than 3,000 years, Passover has been the most widely celebrated of all Jewish holidays. This holiday has endured because it marks a turning point, the moment a people emerged from generations of slavery and became free. The holiday, the story, is not about history. It is about transformation. It is the birth cry of a nation discovering freedom. That is why Passover speaks far beyond the Jewish community. Its lessons belong to anyone, to everyone who's known injustice, and to those of us who care about those who do. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm something essential. Every person has inherent dignity and worth. Oppression is not only cruel, it is a violation of something sacred. The Passover story endures because it insists that no human is born to be owned, chained, silenced, or erased. There are 4 core lessons of the Passover story. We all share the identity of the stranger, the immigrant. The Torah commands, "You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the soul of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt." This is a spiritual memory. Migration is a just act. Exodus is the story of persecuted people fleeing to safety and dignity, seeking life in a new land. In this story, migration is not a crime. It is a sacred journey. The Israelites walk into uncertainty guided only by a pillar of cloud, a pillar of fire, and a stubborn hope that freedom is possible. One law for all. Passover regulations insist there be one law for both the native-born and the immigrant. That is justice. That is equity. Equity is not a modern invention. It is ancient. It is covenantal. And finally, and perhaps most important, Passover commands us to remember what it was like to labor without wages, to remember what it was like when Pharaoh killed our baby boys, to remember what it was like to depend on a master to feed our families, to remember wandering with no guarantee approaching a new land, fear, hunger, remember hope. In Unitarian Universalism, we speak of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That search requires memory, and it takes moral courage, and it asks us not to look away. Last summer, John and I visited a replica of the Anne Frank house. There, we walked through room after room of exhibits documenting exactly how Adolf Hitler dismantled a democracy. In an astonishingly short time, he transformed one of the most tolerant, most diverse nations in Western Europe into Nazi Germany. The steps were eerily familiar. Demonize an alien group, control or discredit the press, undermine the judiciary, and most of all, redraw the circle of belonging. Once a group is cast as dangerous or less than human, the soul of a society can begin to crumble, and that is one reason why remembrance is a spiritual practice. Look back to ancient Egypt, when Pharaoh consolidated power in a turbulent time by turning fear toward a vulnerable minority. The oppression of the Israelites did not emerge from nowhere. It was strategic. According to the Exodus story, Pharaoh made it impossible for Israelites to own property, move freely, control their own labor, or ensure their children's safety. They were confined, exploited, dehumanized. It is no wonder the Exodus story resonated so deeply with enslaved Africans in America. For them, it was not mythology, it was a mirror. They knew what it meant to have movement restricted, families separated, labor stolen, bodies controlled, humanity denied. And so, as they prepared for their exodus, they sang of crossing over because they needed to believe that the waters could part. Across centuries and continents, the structures of oppression do not change, but neither does the structure of the human spirit. Passover is about recognizing the architecture of oppression and celebrating the refusal to accept it as inevitable. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to dismantle systemic oppression. Covenant is a commitment to stay in relationship long enough to build something better. Covenant is how democracy survives. For most of my working life, I help women and children and the occasional man fleeing intimate partner violence. I worked for the organization that opened the very first battered women's shelter in New York State. The idea of shelter itself, that a person had the right and the means to leave a partner who hurt her, was radical. I remember a woman we called the Wolof-speaking woman. Her family in rural Senegal sold her into marriage to a man who wanted a country wife, not one of those back-talking American women. She couldn't speak English, she didn't know how to use money or cross a street, and he taught her nothing. When she got pregnant, he took her to Harlem Hospital, where Wolof-speaking staff provided prenatal care. She missed 2 appointments. A nurse grew concerned and called the police. The police found the Wolof-speaking woman chained to a radiator. Her husband had been arrested and never mentioned her. For 10 days, pregnant and restrained, no food, no water, no way to stand. His arrest became her exodus. Sometimes liberation arrives by miracle, sometimes by design, sometimes because a nurse notices a missed appointment and makes a call. But liberation always begins when someone decides another human being matters. Passover demands that we remember to recognize bondage when we see it, to ask, who is enslaved now? Who is wandering? Who is knocking at a border? Who is chained to a radiator? Our faith speaks of the interdependent web of all existence. When one person is chained, the whole web trembles. When one person is freed, the web strengthens. Unitarian Universalism says, your suffering is not separate from mine. Your freedom is bound up with my own. Passover is not only about what God may have done a long time ago. It is about what we are called to do now. To remember, so that when someone is wandering, we walk beside them. When someone is chained, we look for the key. When someone needs an escape hatch, we build one. To remember, so that when the democratic process is threatened, we protect it, not as politics, but as spiritual discipline. May we be a people who remember. May we be a people who widen freedom. May we be a people who help part the waters again and again and again until all can cross. May it be so.